Gary Walker, thanks so much for joining me today to talk about weather modification.
You're very welcome.
So, you're the co-owner of SOAR, which stands for Seeding Operations and Atmospheric Research. For those of us not familiar with the technology, can you kind of give us the big picture overview of what this sort of weather modification is?
Weather modification goes on in more than 40 countries in our world. Water is an issue for all of us, and the United Nations even predicts that by 2050 that most countries in our world will have water shortages. Um, Weather modification is a tool that's been in existence for well over 50 years. I spent 30 years as the manager of two water conservation districts in Texas. Um, and the depletion of the Ogallala aquifer was one of the main drivers behind my involvement with weather modification. And so in the agricultural areas of the panhandle of Texas, the South Plains of Texas, the eastern New Mexico portions there in your state, the groundwater depletions and declines have been a very big concern for producers, cities as well for many, many years.
So you're working with meteorologists and watching forecasts, and you get those suitable clouds. Kind of what happens next? What's the process?
In the summertime, we're looking for those cumulus type clouds that have liquid water in them, and the airplane will uh, go into the go into the air and go toward the cloud identified by that meteorologist that will have suitable liquid water in it, and we will disperse an ice crystal type nucleus in that cloud, and that synthetic ice crystal then will be attracted to the water particles, those minute water particles, and then they become heavy enough to fall out as a raindrop. Clouds are generally fairly inefficient, and that's why cloud seeding does work. There's a lot of moisture in the atmosphere. A cloud is not like a pitcher full of water, and once it pours out, it's just empty. The atmosphere, suitable clouds that are seeded at the proper time, uh, research has shown that those clouds last longer and produce more rainfall because that atmosphere continues to keep that cloud more or less in a constructive phase.
I know the state of Utah has been doing this for a while. You mentioned California. I'm curious, you've been doing this a while. Is there more and more of a demand for these types of services as more people are really seeing the effects of
Yes,
drought?
absolutely. Cloud seeding is not the silver bullet. It's not going to end all droughts in all countries. But just like so many other things that we have that enhance either our computers or enhance our gas mileage or whatever, um, we can enhance the rainfall and the value, what I call a return on investment, many times is minuscule compared to what it costs to either build a pipeline or dig a new reservoir. Those things take lots and lots of time. And so, not to say that we shouldn't be concerned with conservation and reuse and even new supplies, such as they have available on the coastal areas of our country and other countries for desalinization.
So I imagine that you spend a lot of time talking with people who are pretty worried about the drought. I'm curious if you could, you know, talk a little bit about what you've seen change over the decades when it comes to drought and people trying different things or new things.
Yeah, well, my last 25 years as a water district manager was right up across the eastern side of New Mexico in the Yoakum County area, Plains, Denver City area. Our water declines in the aquifer there many years was as much as 2 to 3 feet a year. So a lot of those areas, um, Laura, they may only have 20, 20, less than 30, 40 feet of saturated thickness left in the aquifer. Um, Pretty easy to divide that by two and figure out about how many years that you have left to irrigate. And so we can extend the life of the aquifer a little by producing some additional rainfall. Not to even talk about the savings and the pumping costs for agriculture, and of course our ranching community. I mean, they're tickled to death to have a half inch anytime, but it's certainly important for the production of our irrigated acres.
Well, Gary, thanks so much for talking with me. I really appreciate it. And here's hoping we all get some good clouds this summer.
Yeah, no kidding. We hope so as well.
Hannah Riseley-White, thanks for joining me today to talk about weather modification.
Thanks, Laura. It's a pleasure to be here.
So when we're talking about weather modification, what activities are we actually, what do those encompass?
Largely that encompasses either ground-based or aerial-based cloud seeding, usually using silver iodide or calcium or potassium chloride. And the idea is to put tiny particles in the sky under exactly the right conditions to help induce droplets to form to increase rainfall.
So this isn't something that's necessarily new in the state of New Mexico. Procedures for the state to evaluate and potentially approve these projects are codified in the state's Water Quality Act. Is that right?
So yeah, actually the Weather Control Act was passed in 1965. And we at New Mexico Interstate Stream Commission were only tasked with evaluating applications for licenses for cloud seeding. In 2003, the legislature moved that responsibility from New Mexico Tech to us. And so just to be clear, we aren't necessarily proponents of it, but we are tasked by statute with evaluating applications for cloud seeding in New Mexico.
So one application for a proposed project in northern New Mexico was recently withdrawn. Can you talk a little bit about what that project would have been and kind of what happened in the process?
Sure. So in October of last year, so 2021, we received an application for a license from a company called Western Weather Consultants. They would be the actual entity that would have conducted this particular project that was ground-based cloud seeding. This would have been a project to induce additional rainfall over the Sangre de Cristo Mountains through ground-based cloud seeding using silver iodide. They, however, were not this project sponsor. That was Roosevelt Soil and Water Conservation District, which received in the 2021 legislative session funding for cloud seeding specifically. But we got a tremendous amount of interest in that application. One of the requirements in our process in New Mexico is that any application for a license for cloud seeding has to be noticed publicly in newspapers. We received over 250 protests associated with that particular application. So lots and lots of interest in it. And we're glad to see that people care and are concerned about water issues in New Mexico. As you, I think, know, we've also been working on the governor's 50-year water plan over the last year. And so hoping that some of the folks whose attention was caught by the cloud seeding efforts might get interested in that process as well, given the sort of scarcities that we're facing.
Do you anticipate, or does the state anticipate getting more of these types of applications? Is this something we're going to see more of, you think?
You know what? I would not be surprised, given that we're in the third year of a significant drought across the state. And as I mentioned earlier, doing this work on the 50-year water plan, you know, the anticipated increasing scarcity to our water supplies across the state is significant. We're looking at a 25% reduction in water supplies by 2070. So I think people will continue to have quite a bit of interest in cloud seeding. I should also mention that in receiving the application that we received last fall for the Sangres, and in looking at this current application, that we have some thoughts at the staff level in terms of potential changes to the rule, the weather enhancement rule, which is what governs how these applications are handled. We also heard pretty loud and clear from folks last fall that they'd like to see some changes. For example, protests have to be received in writing and within certain time period. And so I do think, and we flagged for our commission at our last Interstate Stream Commission meeting, that they should anticipate some potential changes to the rule coming this year that would bring it into the 21st century a little bit, make it easier for folks who care and want to engage, and also streamline the process for us.
So you mentioned some really stark numbers there. And I'm curious because, looking at the current application before the state, they note that industry standards suggest that a 15 to 20% increase in rainfall is likely over a normal summer seeding season of 4 to 6 months. Like, that seems like such a slim, like a slim chance that we're taking. But is the water situation in New Mexico such that we're just trying to grab at any tool or possibility? Like, how big of an impact could weather modification really have?
I think it can be successful given just the right circumstances. So from my understanding, even that 15 to 20% increase is under exactly the right conditions, right? So I think, what's been interesting as part of this 50-year water planning effort is there's a lot of folks who look to solutions that involve increasing supply. So that could be cloud seeding or interbasin transfers or all those types of things. In my opinion, a lot of those are challenging and expensive. And sometimes where you actually get the biggest bang for your buck is conservation, right? So how do we look at how we're using the water that we have now in our existing basins and use it more wisely? And probably ultimately the solution will be some combination of all of those things, lots of tools in the toolbox. But certainly more work needs to be done on a basin by basin basis, and with the water users and stakeholders in each of those basins to think through what are the solutions that make sense in each of those regions, given the scarcity that we're facing. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that cloud seeding is some silver bullet that will solve all of our problems by any means.
Yeah.
But it could be a part of the solution, especially for communities that feel comfortable with it.
Mm-hmm. Well, Hannah Riseley-White, thank you so much for talking with me about this. It's a really fascinating topic.
You're so welcome. I'm happy, and thanks for having me.